Please welcome moderator J.C. Thomas and the International Lessons in Carbon Reduction panel.
Well, good afternoon. My name is J.C. Thomas. I'm Director of External Affairs for Sempra International. It's a pleasure to be here today with some distinguished guests. And what we wanted to deliver at the Maui Energy Conference are ideas that spark discussion on what others are doing around the world, from a political, a policy, and customer approach to achieving carbon reductions while maintaining the highest reliability standards that customers expect. Please help us examine this a little further. We will hear from our experts that are working on today's challenges at the local level, a utility perspective, and what an entire country is doing to reduce carbon emissions in ways that support long-term economic growth. Joining me, and I'll introduce my guests now, are Sarah Moe. Sarah has worked over 10 years as a sustainability professional with business and municipalities. Currently a senior consultant in Sustainable Buildings and Communities Division of DNV GL. She previously was leading Palo Alto's Office of Sustainability Programs. Takashi Ohara. Takashi is a manager of Energy Resources Management Systems, Power System Engineering Office with Tokyo Electric Power, Grid Inc. Ohara-san's education includes a bachelor's degree and master's degree in electrical engineering. Welcome. Masayuki Dewaki. He's Chief Officer of Smart Community Development for NIDO. NIDO is Japanese New Energy and Industrial Technology Organization, and they are doing some amazing things in energy sustainability. Dewaki-san graduated from Yokohama with a master's degree in engineering and completed his master's thesis making hydrogen from biomass. And finally, Jeremy Martin. He is Vice President of Energy Sustainability at the Institute of the Americas in La Jolla, California. Jeremy is a former State Department employee and spends much of his time delving into the geopolitics of energy and closely following energy industry trends, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, and issues across the Americas. And he's a frequent commentator and writer on Latin American and energy issues. And with that, Sarah, I want to welcome you to the podium and turn it over to you to make a short presentation.
Okay. Mahalo for having me. It's always a deep pleasure to be here in Hawaii and for living into this vision of Hawaii becoming a global leader in both renewable energy and climate action. So I am going to give 2 of my 5 minutes to you all because in climate leadership, it's not about me, but it's about we. So that's your warning. I am a facilitator, so I just can't help myself. So I am going to be talking about some leading cities and especially these, the way that cities are sharing through these networks. So how many people have heard of Urban Sustainability Directors Network? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3. All right. And then there's about 180 cities in USDN, and I apologize for the acronym soup. And they're all sharing their practices and connecting and accelerating innovation. There's a lot of climate funders that provide innovation funding, so cities and counties can come with their ideas and their barriers and get funding to try to solve them. And then there's Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, CNCA. How about that one? Anybody heard of that one? Nobody. Oh, 1. Ron. Well, that's cheating. So all 4 counties of Hawaii are part of Urban Sustainability Directors Network. Let's see. Here we go. So looking at the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance group of cities, they are partnered with C40, maybe you've heard of them, or 100 RC, 100, the cities like Honolulu you just heard about that are working on resilience. So here's a snapshot into CNCA cities. What you find is they're setting goals of 80% greenhouse gas reductions by 2050 or sooner. And my clients, for example, City of Santa Monica is one of my clients who's looking at doing carbon neutrality by 2030. So that means they'll hit, it gets to about 80 or 90% reductions and then sequestering the rest of it. Some people are setting renewable energy goals like Hawaii has. So 100% renewable energy instead of carbon neutrality. And other people are just going straight for the 80 by 50 or sooner. Oh, and there's one more type of goal that's up on that chart there, which is fossil fuel free. So what happened when we had the election of our unfortunate current president? There was an uprising of cities that you can find this hashtag. How many people have seen "We Are Still In" hashtag? Okay, a few more, good. So there's over 400 cities when Trump pulled America out of the Paris Accord that signed and said, no, we are still in, including all 4 mayors here in Hawaii. So it got, then there was an avalanche of horrible things from the federal level that were happening, misogynistic, racist, just all kinds of corrupted surprises. And so we saw the cities and counties standing up for, social and environmental injustices that are happening, that have been happening. With these leading cities, you're seeing a consciousness increasing around how we individually, as a person or as a city, as a leader in climate change, are both, are either a part of the problem or a part of the solution. We've seen a lot more of these climate leaders and these cities stepping up to speak truth to this BS. We've also seen, radical collaboration and innovation, creativity across generations, across cultures in cities, because cities are the hubs of innovation and culture change. So here's where I'm gonna have you guys connect a little bit, because this arising of consciousness and arising of cities includes all of us to make sure that we are still in and our whole selves are still in. So what does that practice look like when we're working with leaders in cities? It looks like this. So really quickly, take 10 seconds to turn your focus inward. And you close your eyes if you want. Just check in with yourself. Relax your muscles around your eyes, your shoulders. Check in with your body, how you feeling? Okay, that was good. Now we're just gonna take 20 seconds here to find a neighbor, look to your right or to your left. This is the kind of risk-taking that becomes necessary to achieve these transformative climate goals. We need to talk to strangers. So please find a stranger. If you really don't want to, you don't have to, of course. Okay, awesome. Now one of you is partner A and one of you is partner B. Establish who's A and who's B. Okay. This is awesome. Okay, see, this is the renewable energy. It's happening. All right, so now partner A, you have 20 seconds to tell partner B about your favorite place on Earth. One of your favorite places on Earth. Just 20 seconds in most detail that you can. Okay, go.
I hope they all said Maui.
I'm getting them riled up for you guys. There's some people that are like, oh, I'm not doing this. 5 more seconds. Okay, stop, time. I can see the beauty in the room. This is amazing. Now, partner B, turn to partner A and same question. Tell them one of my favorite places on Earth is, go. Five more seconds. Okay. That's time. So it sounds like you guys are all still in too. So thank you for that. It truly is one of my mentors, Joanna Macy, who talks about this, but it's so important to both fully experience the love we have for Earth, as well as acknowledge the pain of what's being lost if we don't change our ways. So we're gonna do one more exchange with your same partner is fine. Here, just 20 more seconds. So I told you, I'm giving you 2 of my 7 minutes. So the other side of that coin, so partner A telling partner B, what is one thing that breaks my heart about what's happening in the world today? Go.
Stormy Daniels.
It's the second day. There's too much talking time. Yeah, like, forget this. Okay, 5 more seconds. Stop. Partner B, same question. Something that breaks my heart about what's happening in the world today is 20 seconds, go. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, let's go. So thank you so much for doing that. So we do this kind of leadership work with our climate leaders. And I had the privilege of doing it here in Hawaii with the 4 counties after the mayors signed on to the Paris Accord, which basically says that you commit to greenhouse gas reductions, you create your goals, and set a plan to reach those goals. So here you can see some of our friends here in the audience. We posted like crazy. We brainstormed, we filled the entire room with Post-it notes, in fact. So what we did there was, first, doing climate action planning work in Hawaii is like, a fish trying to recognize it's in water, because Hawaii is doing so much in all 4 counties, but they don't have climate action plans, so it's not being tracked and measured in the greenhouse gas sort of framework that we do work with cities in. So there was, they filled up papers and papers of stuff that they're already doing, and we worked on topics from all different sectors. So we do, in human-centered design, we use a question that begins with, how might we? And all 4 counties brainstormed, sort of from their highest vision for Hawaii, how might we, for example, decarbonize buildings or create 100% carbon neutral buildings? How might we get to 30% local food production? How might we create 50% mode shift into public transit, electric vehicles, biking, walking? How might we use innovation, how might we innovate technology procurement? That was a good one. And there were many more. How might we engage all the community, these kinds of things, and actually built roadmaps to addressing those concerns that come out of their hearts and highest visions for Hawaii. So that was fun. Okay, I still have 3 minutes. Okay, so Hawaii is, let's see, no, that was the last one. Okay, so this is a look at what cities can do. So sort of taking a step at, what are top 4 things that cities can do. So one is lead by example. So when you look at greenhouse gas emissions profiles, a lot of times for my clients, it's not the municipal facilities that have a huge chunk of the greenhouse gas emissions in the community. However, it's really important to show that the city is, is serious, and it creates sort of, it's almost like marketing. It shows demonstration projects. It attracts more projects like that. So there's 2 examples: Vancouver's net zero standards for municipal buildings, Vancouver's doing so much, and in my 3 minutes, I can't get into it, but I'm so excited about Vancouver and all that they're doing. And they've stood up for all-electric, 100% renewable, carbon-neutral buildings, and they've had to fight against the fossil fuel industry, and they are winning. They're doing amazing work. And Seattle, and they have a great example of vehicle electrification of their fleet. The second thing is incentivizing action. So this, no matter how small the incentive, again, kind of shows the city is serious, and it catalyzes other actors other than the people that adopted the first electric vehicle, like the Nissan Leaf drivers that only, win 100 miles range. It gets people that maybe are, on the fence to start playing. I waited till the Bolt came out, but so incentivizing action can also catalyze the private sector to then add to your incentive. So you never know what can happen when you start an incentive program. So the two examples there are Melbourne and their building energy efficiency incentives and Chicago's EV purchase subsidies. California has some great EV incentives as well. That's where I live. Okay. Number 3, require results. So here, the two examples are Brussels and the Passive House Standard, and Milan and their low emissions zone and congestion change. So here, rather than making an action in your climate action plan that focuses on a specific actor or a specific action, it's really saying, here's the impact we want to have, and focuses on that impact. And then the fourth thing here is mandating action. So policy. Having an appropriate response to what's happening in the world with policy is what the vanguard cities are doing. You see cities with, I showed you some of their goals, 100% EVs by 2025, car-free city by 2020, the list goes on. So when you lay down a policy like that, you can really push a lot of the implementation onto the private sector, which is awesome because they move a lot faster. It can attract, policy acts as a financial mechanism as well, so it can attract capital. So just putting those policies down. Austin, point of sale, energy audits, they do that in Berkeley where I live as well. So the trick there is obviously enforcement, but it's when when it comes to decarbonizing buildings, getting into the existing building stock is really tricky, and that is one of our main leverage points, so go for that. And then Nottingham and their workplace parking levy. So we also did this in Palo Alto, where you really got to get the employees with long commutes to the employers to not incentivize by giving free parking, but saying you have a choice. You can get a transit pass or you can pay for parking.
Thank you, Sarah. I think we're running a little tight on time, so
Okay.
I appreciate all the information that you provided to us. And
I'm all done.
please give it up for Sarah. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
She really brought it not just from a local government perspective, but right into your seatmate, which is even more incredible, how quickly you can turn to somebody and talk about change. And we appreciate you bringing that to us. Now, we're going to turn it over to Ohara-san and Dawaki-san to enlighten us on what's happening off a little island off the coast of Japan, and how you've been able to take technology and bridge that with what utilities are doing and with what customers and regulators and governments expect from us. So please.
Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dewaki from the NEDO, which is the government agency in Japan. And I was first assigned as an interpreter of TEPCO, but so there is no my name in my organization's name in the program. But since I was doing the stage drama when I was a bachelor degree, so the instinct of the actor brings me here in the podium and stage. So first, how many people knows about NEDO? Oh, thank you. I love this answer. Because the NEDO's relationship between the Maui has started from since 2011, and we conducted the Jump Smart Maui project. But today I'm going to explain a little bit about the Japanese domestic situation. And this is our energy situation in Japan. The Japanese government set the target for the energy mix for 2030. And our target of renewable energy portfolio is in 2030 is about 22 to 24% in the total electricity generation. And however, this is not the RPS. So now Japan is in the phase of the deregulation of the electricity utility business, so already fully liberalized of the electricity retail market, and we are going to legal unbundling will be completed by the 2020. So actually the market energy, future energy mix will be decided by the market, actually. And next, please. Okay. Here. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. And what is the current status of the renewable energy introduction in Japan? Is the renewable energy share in Japan is about 15% in total in 2016. And since, as you can see in the graph, since 2012, the government introduced a feed-in tariff, and after that, the introduction of the renewable energy, especially the solar PV, which indicated in the yellow bar, the introduction of the solar PV has drastically increased, and in the year of the 2016, more than 39 gigawatt of the solar PV has been installed, and 3.4 gigawatt of the wind has installed in 2016. And since our renewable energy introduction in the whole nation is still at 15%, and mostly of the hydro, but some specific region, or is the solar-rich region, has some challenge, facing the challenges of the dark curve issues already, just like Hawaii. And this is the supply and demand curve. And you can see the peak demand is in the evening time. The peak demand, demand curve indicated by the red line. And since this is the holiday season's demand and supply curve, so that means the demand during the noon time is very low because no factories and no commercial sectors are working, the office building is not working. So, but the rooftop and large-scale solar PV generate electricity. That means the surplus electricity is rising. So at this moment, the surplus electricity from the solar PV is absorbed by the pumped hydro. But we will face that more and more renewable energy, such as the solar PV, is installed. We will face the severe challenges for the dark curve issues. So, in order to tackle these challenges, the NEDO fund TEPCO and the other Japanese company, and also the universities, to create a new domestic demonstration project in one of the small islands in Japan, which imitate the energy mix in 2030. So we are trying to minimize the grid and reserve facility cost and try to enable the maximum introduction of renewable energy. Then the top TEPCO will explain about the detail of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ohara-san. Dawaki-san, thank you very much. Ohara-san, please.
'Aloha, I'm Takashi Ohara from TEPCO Power Grid. I'm glad to have an opportunity to make a presentation. First of all, I briefly introduce our company. TEPCO introduced holding company system in 2016 and was divided into three main companies. Our company, TEPCO Power Grid, is a transmission distribution company. Others are generation company and retail company. This is Japan map. And this marked area is TEPCO's service area. In TEPCO service area, peak demand is about 50 gigawatt. Installed renewable energy is 12 gigawatt at 2016. And this enlarged picture shows the islands around Tokyo, where we are responsible for the power supply. This is Nijima project is part of R&D project on grid integration of viable renewable energy of NEDO. Next, purpose of Nijima project. According to the Japanese government, long-term energy supply and demand outlook and renewable energy will account for 22 to 24% of the total power generation in 2030. As a 2030s Japan model, we have demonstrated massive introduction of renewable energy into the island grid. We are going to study output power prediction and output power control of renewable energy facilities like PV and WT. To develop this technology is main target for us. Nijima project schedule. This project schedule is 5 years project, and we are in the 4th year now. Nijima layout of facilities. This is a layout of facilities in Nijima Island. We have 5 diesel engine generators. The other facilities was installed in this project. In Nijima, total demand is from 1,900 kilowatt to 4,400 kilowatt. Total installation of renewable energy is about 1,200 kilowatt, which capacity over 27 and up to 60% total demand. Power generation, wind power, solar power, storage battery. Rooftop PV and battery, and demand side, heat pump at hot springs, and cooling facilities at fish port we installed. And then to predict output of renewable energy, we installed weather observation equipment at 14 spots. And we try to improve prediction accuracy. This is overview of distributed coordinated control system. Existing system only monitors and controls diesel engine output. New system, firstly, renewable energy output forecast is input integrated EMS. Next, EMS make plans for supply and demand management. Then EMS realize cooperative control with existing power source and storage battery and renewable energy and demand side facilities. This is some example of field test. This chart shows mitigating of wind power output variation. This example is mitigating of frequency variation. This is about development plan for more practical use. We'd like to develop supply and demand planning and operation know-how at the time of massive introduction of renewable energy. This is the purpose of this project.
Ohara-san, thank you very much. That was very enlightening. Thank you.
attention.
And
Thank you for your attention.
we'll definitely want to talk more about that and how you can take that technology where you did above all. I mean, you threw everything at that island and how we can scale that up to serve a city like Tokyo. But we'll come back to that later. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Martin now to talk about what we're doing in Mexico. Jeremy, welcome.
Well, thank you, JC, and thanks everybody. Thank you to everyone here at the Maui Energy Conference. I really appreciate the opportunity to come over from California and join you all today, and especially want to say thank you to Amber, who I haven't had the chance to meet yet, but who was delightful in helping me arrange my participation. So there you are. Hello, finally. Good to meet you. So apparently I need to add an audience participation part to my remarks here. So let's go with this one. I always like homespun beginnings. How many of you all have heard about the turtle on the fence post? Well, I beat everybody. I got 0 hands raised for the turtle on the fence post. Well, the homespun, that's sort of a homespun way. You know, if you're driving down the road and you see a turtle on a fence post, you can reasonably assume that it didn't get there by itself. And you might be wondering right now, well, what the heck is he talking about other than the fact he wanted us to see if we knew that story or not? Well, what I mean is that, and it's something that Sarah got into, policy making and policy makers. So we all have a role in putting that proverbial turtle on the fence post. And so what I want to do is take Mexico and talk a little bit about what they've done. I don't want to say what they've done in terms of putting a turtle on the fence post, but maybe I will. But let me walk through a few things. There's about 4 specific points, 4 specific elements about Mexico that I'd like to run through pretty quickly, and then hopefully we can get into a little bit more of the conversation. Just a quick background, because I want to make sure that we'll at least have some of the backdrop to where Mexico was before some of the main parts of my conversation. And historically, Mexico had a state-run electric sector with a major power state-owned enterprise, a major utility that was state-owned called CFE. So it was a monopoly that essentially ran and took charge of the entire electric sector. And that was the way it was for a better part of 100 or so years. The electric market as it developed in Mexico was inefficient, expensive, and was impacting Mexico's global competitiveness. But it was also, as you can imagine, a large source of emissions, and increasingly so. In the power market, which in Mexico is about 60 gigawatts of installed capacity, had developed a major dependency on fossil fuels for about 80% of its mix. So about 80% of the generation of that 60 gigawatts in Mexico historically had been on the back of diesel or fuel oil. And so you can understand the challenges that the policymakers in Mexico were dealing with in terms of emissions profile, in terms of competitiveness, especially in high-price environments with oil. So that's sort of the backdrop, and let me quickly turn to what those policymakers and what the politicians actually in the government did. And Mexico had talked for years about reforming its energy sector. And during the campaign of 2012, the candidate who ended up winning, Enrique Peña Nieto, saw energy reform as one of the critical areas, one of the critical structural adjustments to be able to address some of Mexico's lagging economic development issues. And so really sought to use the energy sector and the overhaul of the energy sector, so a real structural adjustment of energy in Mexico, as a way to perhaps unleash some growth in Mexico, and to really get into some of those things I just got done talking about, the inefficiencies in the sector, the high prices consumers were paying, and what it was doing to that country's global competitiveness. So what they wanted to do is move from a state-led, a state-dominated, state-run energy sector to one that was more of an open market with increased participation, increasing the role of private players, and again, trying to use competition to lower prices. And again, with this goal of competitiveness and this goal of Mexico hopefully being able to compete more globally. They also had, obviously desires of boosting employment opportunities and boosting the opportunities for Mexican citizens as well. So they were aiming at overturning about 100 years of an entrenched energy model that was run by the government and the state. So there was a whole host of reform measures. They amended the Constitution. I could speak for hours about what was done, but let me focus in on the final piece of that energy reform. And the final piece of the energy reform in Mexico was a law called the Energy Transition Law, which actually followed. The majority of the legislation, the constitutional amendment, and the implementation legislation was done in 2013 and 2014. What came in December 2015 was the Energy Transition Law. And so many folks have taken to calling that law the final piece of the energy reform in Mexico. And pardon me to read the aim of the law, but I think it's important so we really understand why and how important this law was as the final piece of overhauling the sector in Mexico. And the law specifically states that it aims to regulate the sustainable use of energy and articulate the industry's obligations regarding the country's need to transition to using clean energies and cutting polluting emissions while maintaining Mexico's productivity and competitiveness globally. So again, you can see the policymakers' desire through that law, and obviously legislators as well. And I should add that law was written in accordance with a law that had already been approved in Mexico, the general climate change law that the country had passed a couple years prior to that. So the energy transition law was created and written to dovetail with many of the climate action goals in Mexico's commitments to emission reductions and black carbon. Let me just lay out the four pieces of the, three pieces of the energy transition law. And what the energy transition law, and apart from that exact verbiage I just read to you, the main thing it did was as a policy-making goal, as a policy-making mechanism, use clean energy goals. So the energy transition law in Mexico set out clean energy goals in the country with, we heard about in Japan, the 22 to 24%. Mexico was right in them, just above that with a 25% clean energy production goal by the end of this year, by the end of 2018. It jumps to 30% by 2021 and 35% by 2024. So policymakers in the government set the clean energy goal as a driver to boost clean energy and renewable deployment in the country. Secondly, there was also an element of the energy transition law that set energy efficiency goals. And so in addition to targeting reduction of consumption by consumers, there was also obligations for manufacturers of appliances and windows and a whole host of other items such as that were put into this law. Finally, the third key piece of the energy transition law are the clean energy certificates. And so again, it was a policy mechanism. It was a tool that the policymakers put into this energy transition law in Mexico. It's essentially renewable energy credit. They call it the CELs, the Certificado de Energías Limpias, the clean energy certificates, as a way to drive clean energy goals in Mexico. So to use that as a way to pursue those goals I mentioned earlier of 25%, 30%, and 35%, and to obligate some of the larger fossil fuel consuming entities or companies in Mexico to have to buy clean energy credits if they weren't going to transition to more renewables or clean energy generation. So the final piece of the policy tools and everything well, not the final piece because there's a whole, but the final piece I'd like to share is long-term auctions, long-term power auctions. And again, not trying to beat a dead horse here, but the policy tool of setting long-term power auctions and the government deciding in their overhaul of the electric market that they would utilize power auctions to drive incorporation of technologies. And the auctions, by the way, were technology agnostic, so they weren't actually renewable auctions, they were long-term power auctions that put in place the opportunity for renewables to compete. I'm sure for those of you who follow this well know that during the course of, they've had 3 auctions now in Mexico, they've garnered international headlines. At one point in time, the price, I think it was the second auction, the price for solar set a world record. I think it's since been beat by Chile or Qatar, but the auctions in Mexico have been successful. They've signed contracts and added about 8 gigawatts of new wind and solar projects that will start coming online in Mexico over the next year, 2, 3 years. And so it really has been a useful combination of policy mechanisms in Mexico where they drive the transition by, like I said, this energy transition law. And just a final factoid that sort of underscores just how attractive Mexico is beyond what I just talked about with the auction results. Bloomberg New Energy Finance does an annual climate scope survey, which I'm sure many of you know about. And in the most recent one last year, they ranked Mexico 4th out of 71 countries in terms of the attractiveness for renewable energy investment. Pretty remarkable when you think that in 2012 and early 2013, that market was pretty much closed off, definitely to private entities investing in the renewable space or to a certain degree in the renewable space. So let me just end by saying that I think what all this underscores in Mexico is that policymakers really have fully integrated goals of decarbonization and those objectives into what is a massive overhaul of their energy sector. And so I think it's particularly relevant when you look at the the electricity sector and how they've worked to pull carbon out of the matrix there, and how the energy transition law has begun, just in a very short period of time, to really deliver results. I'll stop there and be welcome to have some. We can talk about some other countries too if you want.
Thank you, Jeremy. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to do some rapid fire questions and just go down the line, and including a question that we received from the audience. And so, Jeremy, I'll start with you since we're still rolling on Mexico. And what you just gave us was about 5 or 6 years worth of work of reforming their energy market in what had been 50 years of minimal change. I mean, things have really transformed in a short amount of time. And what I want to touch on that I heard is, number one, they're going to lower emitting resources from a carbon perspective, like natural gas, away from the diesel and other things. That's significant. And number two, they now are pursuing renewable energy, wind and solar, very aggressively. What's driving it in Mexico? And I'm just going to pose 3 things, and maybe it's all 3, but I want you to elaborate in 60 seconds or less. Is it climate change, energy security, or is it economic growth?
All of the above.
Care to elaborate? You get 58 more seconds.
57 seconds left?
Yes.
No, absolutely. Look, I went through why reform? Why did they? Well, the desire to try and unleash some economic development. But let's also take a step back and look at the climate side of this. And Mexico has a Pacific and Atlantic coast, a Caribbean coast, highly, highly vulnerable to extreme climate. So and for Mexico, it's not just a matter of being, the climate action for the sake of reducing emissions and being part of the Paris Agreement and taking leadership in the hemisphere. It is absolute good business sense. And as a country, when we talk about resilience, in Baja, there was a hurricane that took their grid offline. And Baja is essentially an island. And so there was a huge price to be paid. So I say all of the above, but the climate action, the economic elements, and what was your third thing?
Well, that would be energy security. Sure.
And so energy security, when you have growing dependence, so you're switching a little bit of a dependency from imported fuel oil and diesel products to now a natural gas from a northern neighbor that has taken a bit of a change in its posture towards you geopolitically.
That's
I
another
put that in fairly diplomatic terms? I don't know.
Read about it on Twitter. All right, thank you very much, Jeremy. I'm going to switch to a question that came in for Ohara-san and Dawaki-san, and the question had to do with, I think it was one of the first NITO slides about the year 2030. So I want to pose it like this, 60 seconds or less. What is the energy mix of Japan today, and what is it going to be in 2030? Because someone mentioned that says 26% coal. Is that still the case? Do you project using coal in Japan in the year 2030?
At this moment, I just remember the only figure about the renewable energy at this current that I explained is about 15%. The rest of that, since after the Fukushima Great East Japan earthquake, the nuclear power plants has shut down, and almost 30% is dependent on the LNG, and the 30%, another 30% is depending on the coal-fired plant. And since after the Fukushima earthquake, we imported a lot of fossil fuels from the outside of Japan, and that caused a cost increase, electricity cost increase. And the Japanese government is caring about the electricity tariff increase. So the energy mix in 2030, according to the government announcement, they are still wants to use the coal-fired plant. This is a lot of argument. It's also inside of Japan, and but still, yes, I know the coal-fired plant has a lot of argument, not only inside of Japan but outside of Japan. So, but the government still have a target to install that kind of the amount of the coal-fired plant in the 2030.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then I just want to point out what you guys are doing on a small island off the coast of Japan. We'd like to hear more about in the future of how you can scale that up to serve the city of Tokyo or even the entire island, of using the above all strategy of storage and solar and wind and pumped hydro and things like that. So we're interested in hearing more about that. Last question is for Sarah, and that has to do with back to local government and the local level. What is the number one thing that you think city councils or county boards can do to take action. I mean, if they're limited on resources or they don't have the support that they need, but they have an interest in doing something meaningful and impactful for their communities, what is the number one thing that we can at least help them or communicate to them in doing?
Yeah, so like I said, I think the leading cities are, they're centers of innovation. So what that means is they're really opening up to the power within collaboration. And so businesses, communities together, working with the government, so the government doesn't have to do everything. So that's kind of the leading cities. That's what the lesson learned is. And an example of that in the work that was funded by the USDN Innovation Fund, a project I was leading last year with the City of Boulder, City of Burlington, City of New York, and City of Washington, D.C. They're working on building electrification. So there's a big move to procure 100% renewable energy and then transition buildings to using systems that actually use that renewable energy instead of fossil fuels. So the building electrification project was around heat pumps, and so that became a hot topic. And so the way that's being deployed this year is through a partnership. So the city government worked with the energy efficiency program to get incentives going, and also then Mitsubishi came in to further sweeten the deal with incentives. So these heat pumps are being deployed with that collaboration.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for all of our panelists in sharing what's happening internationally in very different ways that we can all learn some lessons from and grow from. I appreciate you taking the time to come here and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you.